Welcome, everyone. It is a special late week edition of Monday Match Analysis. I'm Gill Gross. It is a data dive with Tom Corrie. He's been on the show a few times already. He is the lead analyst at TennisViz. You see their social media accounts at Tennis Insights, but they are also the machine behind the program called Tennis IQ, which is the main data platform for the coaches and the players on the ATP Tour, where they go to get their information and their data for scouting and all of that. So we have the pleasure to have him on the show, and we dig into some curiosities. So a lot of this ends up being about, there are certain things I see, or there are certain things I'm wondering, and I basically get to bring Tom on, and I tell him a few days in advance, this is what I'm curious about. Let's look at numbers and get some good, hard answers, at least as hard as we can get them. So I'm going to do a pretty hard tease here and kind of go through the topics. That way you guys know exactly what's coming, especially because this ends up being sort of always heavy listening. We've gotten, I should say, great feedback, mostly thanks to Tom, but certainly these are episodes that are thick with information. So I just want to set the table, so to speak. We're going to start with Alcaraz Sinner, and I've been fascinated by the serve battle, and we've covered it a lot. I don't want to continue to beat a dead horse, but this is an opportunity to kind of get some answers on some of the things we've been wondering. Has Carlos Alcaraz's serve caught up to Jannik Sinner's serve in level recently? Is it there yet in the big picture? Almost more importantly, has Carlos Alcaraz indeed outserved Jannik Sinner in their head-to-heads? And is that because Carlos's serve has gotten better, or Jannik's serve, statistically, at least in terms of effectiveness, has gotten worse? We're going to look at the numbers behind the serves of Alcaraz and Sinner. And also, by the way, another massive revelation in their specific head-to-head matchups, an area where Jannik Sinner's efficiency goes way down when he faces Carlos Alcaraz. We're going to look at that. Who's the best net rusher on tour? Just a general curiosity I had. We're going to talk about Ben Shelton. I think it's quite obvious that he's made some major improvements. What do those improvements look like when we really go under the hood in the analytics? Holger Rune is a player I wanted to ask about. He has continued to kind of hover outside the top 8, inside the top 20. I asked Tom, what is Holger Rune really best at? Like, where does he shine? And what is he worst at? I wanted answers on those. We also get into Alexander Bublik, who's made a really strong top 20 push in the last 6 months or so. Look at the numbers behind that. And we may have touched on a couple of other topics, but I'm going to leave it at that as far as the tease is concerned. Without further ado, here's Tom Corrie. We're joined once again by Tom Corrie, lead analyst at TennisViz, where we always deep dive into the numbers, dig for a little gold. Tom, thanks for coming on again.
Pleasure to be back, Gil. Always fun to talk to you about this stuff, so great to be here.
So I've been enjoying the social media as always, and recently I noticed, because I sent out something about serve quality between Sinner and Alcaraz, which is something that I have been interested in seeing for a long time now. And, you know, there's just a lot of sort of confusion about, well, there's serve rating that the ATP comes out with and serve quality. And the reason I like serve quality is because it takes away everything else. It really just looks at the serve and how effective is it. So before we get into some Alcaraz Sinner serving stuff, can you explain, like, what are the main variables that go into the number serve quality?
Yeah, absolutely. So we split it out, as you know, by serve quality, return quality, forehand and backhand quality. All as their own metrics. They're all considering, we work with the rights holders and the ball and player tracking data. So we're getting all that data in real time, and it's considering the main things are the speed of the shot, the spin, the accuracy, so the depth and the width of the forehand, whereas the serve, the accuracy, so speed, spin, depth and width. And then it also does take into account the impact it has on the opponent. So whilst, as you pointed out in your video, it's nothing to do with winning and losing the points. So that's the biggest thing that you correctly pointed out in your video, is that people say, well, we've had this debate before. Federer's the best server of all time because he used to have the highest win percentage of all the different surfing metrics and everything. It's like, no, it was an excellent server, obviously, extremely accurate spot server, obviously. But if you take just the serve in isolation, Isner had a pretty damn good serve back then. Now, we have the same thing with Petri Parikard or Bublik or Berrettini or Zverev. It's like Sinner is winning more first serve points won because he and Alcaraz are the best at the game, but that's not the isolation of the serve and the impact that exact shot has on the opponent.
Right. Like Rafael Nadal, if you look at all-time serve point win percentage on clay, he's top 20 all time. But everybody knows that Rafa doesn't have a top 20 serve of all time. So that's why it's so valuable to isolate the single shot. So when it comes to Sinner and Alcaraz, there has been a lot of talk about the serving in their specific head-to-heads. But I think bigger picture, I am starting to wonder if Carlos, with the serve adjustments that he made at the start of the year, and we looked at them in February, Tom, from a data standpoint, and honestly, the data didn't show us much improvement. It was about the same. But I have a feeling maybe that has begun to change. And I'm mainly curious if Carlos has started to actually catch Jannik in serve quality.
I'm going to do what I do in all these talks, Gill, is lean on the data heavily and flash up some of the tools we use to analyze the data. And what I'm showing you here is Carlos. I'm filtering for 14 matches across the ATP Tour. So I've gone for the most recent. So I've gone for post, sort of, I've included Queens, but then the summer heading into now. So again, just for the fans at home, we're using ATP data set for this, so it's not the slams. So I can't give you the data on the US Open, where obviously he served well. If you look at the first serve, all the traditional data points, the points won, it was all sky high. But anyway, so let's take this data set, and we can see that his serve quality is up at an 8.0. That's slightly higher than his average of a 7.9. So not massively improved, but it is improving. But then a really cool thing to look at, which is a metric that I know you like, is this serve effectiveness. So that, for, as this graphic showing the fans at home or the people listening, is for it to be an effective first serve. We take serves that are aces, serves that are unreturned, but then crucially serves that put you into an attack on the ball three. So essentially get you up in the point. And if you combine those things from that recent form, he's up at 68.8% serve effectiveness compared to 58. So 10% higher. So that is saying that as well as his serve quality increasing slightly, so that's the speed and the accuracy, it's also leaning on, you could suggest that he's serving smarter here because he's picking, I'm drawing conclusions now, but he's picking opponents' weaknesses because he's creating more unreturned and he's creating more shots in attack. So he's serving smarter in doing that. And that certainly matches the eye test at the recent US Open, where there was a lot of big points where Carlos leaned on his serve and came up with an ace or came up with points that the opponent missed the return, that this is backing up. This is ATP only data. But I'm saying this matches my picture of what was happening at the US Open.
And I agree. So we're seeing a rise in serve effectiveness from Alcaraz since the start of Queens.
Exactly.
Where does Sinner fit into that picture? Because, and the reason why there's been such a curiosity on my end in this discussion specifically is because, especially if you rewind 2 years ago, since fall of 2023, when Sinner improved the serve, somewhat drastically, the thought is he has the advantage in this area of the game, and he needs to use that advantage in this area of the game. And now the question is, does that advantage still exist?
It does. If you take their 52-week average scores, it does still exist. Sinner has got, across the tour and even this year, the highest serve quality and the slightly higher serve effectiveness. But Carlos has closed that gap based on recent form, as I was just saying it. But this is a really cool, you can see this on your screen, the head-to-head graphic here. So this is really cool. because what I'm showing you here is the 52-week averages numbers for most of our leading insights, where for the fans at home that can't listen, Sinner has the edge in almost all of them for the 52-week average, because this is across the ATP Tour, every match they play. And we know that Carlos, as amazing as he is, he's not yet Mr. Consistent. Like he, and I've got some really cool stuff coming up in a minute about where he overperforms and where he sometimes underperforms. But if you look at these metrics, Sinner has the edge. But then if I crucially change it to their head-to-head matches, so when they play each other on the ATP Tour, and I've put the last few years in here, so this is all the matches they've ever played each other on the ATP Tour. Now, almost all the metrics shift to Carlos's favour, including the serve. So Sinner goes from having an 8.3 serve quality against everybody else, basically, to down to a 7.6. So a big, big drop off. And then crucially, what I'll also point you to is the conversion score, which is the points won when you're in attack. 74% tour leading for Sinner of every player, points won in attack. When he plays Carlos, shifts to 61%. A 61% for everybody else is bad. The tour average is 69%. So they would be, if you came off a court, you would feel like you've underperformed if you had a 61% in attack points won conversion score.
That's incredible.
So that, and then if what I've got for you in front of you here is, this is Jannik filtered again, playing against Carlos. So this is just his matches against Carlos on the ATP Tour. And look at this. This is, I'm about to turn on his player average. This is Carlos normal, 74% conversion score, as I was saying, 73, 74. Then look at that drop-off when he plays against Carlos. So his ability to win point, and then his serve falls off. He actually returns. That's not a factor. But his ability to win points in attack when he plays Carlos is a major issue for him winning those matches.
Yeah. Now, of course, Alcaraz is the leader tour-wide in steal percentage. So he is, in fact, the hardest player to win in attack against. But that is an incredibly low number, and it speaks to some of the things that Jannik has been talking about, which is I need to be more unpredictable and find more creative ways to finish, because blasting through the court, which is his, regular mode of attacking opponents and rushing them, is proving to be insufficient against Alcaraz's defense, evidenced by that conversion score being very, very low.
Exactly. And to go again, this data set was ATP, but we all watched the Wimbledon final where Jannik did win and converted a lot of those attacking opportunities. We all watched the US Open final where he didn't win, and it was noticeable the amount of times where Jannik would have short forehands and different shots that, whether it's Carlos or whether it's him. So there's definitely a lot going on there in terms of the matchup and internally in Jannik's head, right? Like that he plays everyone else, he doesn't doubt anything. He plays Carlos, and obviously there's some doubt. But just picking up on what you said, we did this post. I know you liked it in the past, but Sinner, and again, this is unbelievable, really, that he's number one across the tour for the percentage of core shots played. So that is the lack of variety. And we've broken it down on the pod before, but core shots being fundamental topspin ground strokes that cross the baseline rather than like an angle, a forehand topspin angle gets put into the variation shots, along with slices, short slices, drop shots, moon balls, volleys, any of those variation shots. So he's number one on the tour for core shots. And that is not a problem against everybody else. It's not a problem. Everyone says it's lazy sort of analysis to just go, Sinner needs more variation. It's the kind of thing that's been thrown at Medvedev in the past, or even a younger Djokovic, or lots of people that are very good at what they do, just need more variation because we all watch them, we don't see them. It's lazy analysis, because against everyone else, he doesn't need it. It beats, but against Carlos, he even himself is saying he does need to add that bit of variation because it's not getting it done.
Right. And admitting that it might be harder for him to, well, basically he might make more mistakes Like as he starts to implement this stuff into his game, he might make more mistakes, which could open the door for opponents who haven't been able to beat him to maybe beat him a couple of times over the course of the year. But Jannik's take is that it's worth it.
This last thing on Carlos before we move on from, obviously don't want to dominate too much Jannik and Carlos because there's lots of good stuff. But this one we pointed out, this is, again, when we found this in the data, we were like, it's almost like poetry. Like sometimes you find things and you think, it can't be this. The data can't back up your eyes like this much. But this post we did recently, this is for the fans at home. Carlos's forehand shot quality versus top 50 players, top 20, top 10, and then versus top 5. And it's almost moving in a straight line from he performs his best versus the top guys. So his average forehand quality, you can't quite see it on this graphic, but I think it was 9.11 average forehand quality versus the top 5 players on the ATP Tour. And versus the top 50, it's 8.6, which is still one of the best. But it's just unreal that he is really, the data is backing up what we all feel, that he's a big time player and he turns up when he needs to and he cuts down his mistakes and he just performs excellently.
Yeah, because outside of that logic, this makes no sense.
Yeah.
I mean, you would think that a top 5 player is going to give him better balls, put him under more pressure, squeeze him into some errors. That is not happening. It's instead the mentality of I better play well because it's Sinner across the other side of the net. It's Zverev, it's Djokovic on the other side of the net. And it's raising his, at least in this case specifically, his forehand shot quality. Yeah, that's an incredible find. This is just a question that I wanted to throw your way and see kind of what the numbers say. Very simple one. Who's the best net rusher on tour?
Yeah, so I'll lean on my tools again. But if we did some, I'll come back to it in a minute, but we did some analysis of the top 10 guys recently. But I can also go to last 52 weeks. This is a leaderboard of points won when points won when you're at the net. So actually, Grigor, we miss him. We hope he's getting fit and coming back soon. But he leads the tour for points won at the net. This is a surprise, but we can jump into a bit more detail here. de Minaur second, Goffin third, and then it goes down. You've got Jannik at 5th, Tsitsipas, and you can see the list in front of you going down. Mm-hmm. But then crucially, what we did on one of these posts when we take the top 10 players is Demon's number 1 for points won at the net. And then another graphic we built was that crucially you want to take into account the frequency, because it's a classic way of like Rafa always used to have incredibly high points won because he was brilliant at picking the moment when to come in and he did volley well. Whereas if you are coming in loads, then it's harder to maintain that number. But this graphic shows you here the frequency, which actually Demon is not like low in the top 10 for coming in. But Zverev actually comes in a lot, which is quite surprising in a way. But he also gets brought in quite a lot because of his deep court positioning. And this does include if someone drop shots you, which he is getting drop shotted double the amount of times as a lot of the top 10 players. They get brought in. That obviously counts as a point at net when you finish the point. So he's getting in a lot, but not winning that much. Demon's coming in less, but winning a lot. And then you've got Carlos up there as like top 3 for points won at net when he comes in as well.
I was also struck by the Zverev number, how often he's in. And then Shelton, of course, he's in a ton. He's not winning as much as he wants to be winning yet. Those were my big takeaways from those couple of graphics that you guys put on social. Let's go and talk a little bit more about Ben Shelton, actually. At the start of the year, he said something in Australia that was music to my ears, because it was very obvious that in order for Ben to be a better player more consistently, he just had to break serve more. So that's like an overarching issue. And now the question is, what areas of my game need to get better in order for me to break serve more? And he and his father pinpointed 3 areas: movement, return, and backhand. So now we're almost through the season. We're into the fall. Ben has done some great things this year. He is poised for probably his first ATP finals berth. Have those things improved movement, return, backhand?
So if I take what I've done here again is filter for recent, so this summer, to US hard court again, and we're seeing the return quality still not anywhere near, obviously, his serve quality or his in attack numbers, but we're seeing the return quality on the rise. So tour average 6.5, his 52-week average 6.6, he's up to 6.8, so it is improving. And if we dive in a little bit more, you actually find the first serve returns in recent times, quite a big jump, 68% first serve returns in compared to his own average of 63%. Second serve returns in, 84%, up from 79. So second serve return, prime example, his own average for the last 52 weeks, below the tour average, 79 compared to 82, but jumping up to 84 in recent times. So I would say the data suggesting on the return that he's definitely trending in the right direction. So at the beginning of the year, there wasn't much in the data to suggest that he was returning better, but recently there is.
Okay.
And I'm using the in scores as a big factor contributing to the return quality. They're not the only factor, but when you're as good as him, and I've got something cool for you here, actually. When you're as good as him, getting the return in is fundamental because he can win a lot of points once he's in the point. But if he doesn't make the return, you don't win. And what I was going to say, I knew there was something here. Look, first serve return speed, I know these numbers are probably quite small on your screen, but first serve return speed is actually down 57 miles an hour compared to his own average of 60. So but I thought, well, he must be slicing more. He's not. His slice to topspin ratio is the same. So that you could then draw conclusions that he's taking smaller cuts at those returns. He's using his racket skills better to take smaller swings, placing the returns in more, and then getting in the points. So it's a big improvement. This directly linked to what you said. Look, what I'm showing you on your screen now is the points won, to make it simpler, by 0 to 4, 5 to 8, and 9 plus. Then to go into a little bit more detail, I'm splitting it by serve and return. And look at this, Shelton's 9 plus, so the long rallies, when he's returning, his average is 39%. In recent, he's up to 47%. So we know that many more points are played in the shorter rallies. But if you do engage in those longer rallies, which is happening, he's winning 10% almost more of those, which contributes to somewhere where he hasn't been very strong, which is his steal score. Because despite being an excellent athlete, his steal score has always been lower than the best players for defending. And that's now jumped up from 28% as his average to 33%. And again, it's not his bread and butter. His bread and butter is winning the short points, which he does really well with his massive serve. But then to break serve, you have to be able to defend, as you were saying, and win those longer points when that chance comes up. And he's improved the ability to do that.
Yeah, what I said recently is he just needs to be respectable in some of these other areas. If you have the serve and forehand weaponry that he possesses, the task is not to become phenomenal as a baseliner or a returner. It's to become respectable in those areas, and then you start to build a player who can be, I think, overall an elite player. So that's great stuff on Shelton, and we saw so much of that in Canada, winning the longer rallies in some key moments in return games, no doubt about that. Shall we move on to Holger Rune?
Yeah.
So what has struck me recently about Holger is, look, we've had conversations about the identity and what style should he play, but the fact is that's all born out of his options and how he has a vast array of abilities. So I'm just curious, two things. What comes up in the numbers as Holger Rune's most apparent strengths? What is he best at? And then also, what is he worst at? Because he seems to be such an even player. To be honest, I think almost lacking those peaks, those things that he can trust, all the time, but also not somebody who has a lot of massive weaknesses. I do suspect, I have a theory of what I think his weakest point is going to be, but I'll save that and I'll see what the numbers say.
Yeah. So Yeah, what I've done here, and you can see from his radar that it is very even, as you were saying. So we already saw Sinner's that's usually just like a big full. Had that dip when he plays Alcaraz. If you take Compecci Pericard, you're going to get this massive V up by the serve, but then the other areas. Rune is very even here, and I've actually filtered for because, interestingly, like Carlos, he's always had this reputation of when he plays the better players, he locks in and he plays better. He has a good win loss, or he's certainly used to have even stronger win loss versus the top players. So I filtered for his top 10 versus top 10 players here, and you start to get this very even radar that has 7.9 forehand quality, 7.8 backhand, a good steal score, 35%, conversion slightly low. And then interestingly, if I turn his overall averages on, so everything largely goes out when he plays top 10, with the exception of the in attack, which we've discussed before. He actually plays now, partly because he's playing stronger players that don't give him the opportunities to attack, but partly because he probably plays just more consistent across the board when he plays those top guys. Mm-hmm. Doesn't play as much like the Holger where he's playing unbelievable points and then dips where he's being more erratic. So everything becomes even. For context, when you put in the leaderboards and you put in last 52 weeks, and we go here, and this is just always good, we go forehand quality. For context, you get the Sinner and Novak and Carlos at the top. Anything above an 8 is elite when it comes to shot quality and forehand and backhand. Holger's 7.9, 7.8 on the backhand, so close to elite versus the top 10 and dropping down there. And 7.3 return is elite because that number is usually lower.
But that's what really drops off, right? The drop off in return quality.
Yeah, exactly.
Against the lower cut, that goes down to 6.5, and that would have been my guess for Holger's weakest aspect.
Yeah, and the data backs that up.
And then for strength, again, like I just think it would be what Rune, and I don't know if there's an easy fix for this, but the serve is a 7.7, the forehand is a 7.9, the backhand is a 7.8. I think it would help clarify his game, and he's a good net rusher, as we saw earlier. His net points were really good. It would help him clarify his vision if there was almost one thing that he could go to and lean on quite heavily to do the deeds, right? And he doesn't have that luxury. It's kind of this array of solid tools.
Yeah. I mean, the serve and the forehand are big, so it could go more that way. But he moves well and he hits his backhand well, so it's almost like his backhand's clean as a whistle. I know some of the players talk about his backhand as one of the stronger backhands they play against, and they don't want to go to his backhand. Anyway, yeah. So,
but it's not going to take over a match.
No, exactly.
He's not going to start blowing backhand winners by you left and right, and nobody really does that on the backhand. So I think a great backhand is awesome to have, but it's not going to carry you at any point, unless you're Elmer Moeller.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's go to Alexander Bublik. Who's made a top 20 push. He's won a 4th title of the season. He's up to a career high. I'm not checking, so I don't have this in front of me, but I think he's up to 16 in the world. I'd love to dig into the numbers in terms of what's enabled this. There's a couple of questions that I have about Bublik, but where do you go when I just leave it open-ended? Why has Bublik been so good?
Well, I will start with, to back up your point, what you're looking at for the fans that are watching is you're looking at something we call a season performance tracker. Look at, this is a tour average line on the horizontal line. Look at him struggling earlier in the year when we were hearing these rumors of like him going, not even sure how much I want to play and all that stuff. And then look at what happened post Rome through Halle. This is just ATP, so it hasn't got the slams in there, but some good runs in the slams as well. And then a seemingly very bad performance to sort of end this thing against Manarino only yesterday in Tokyo. But a 17 match winning streak on the ATP tour until he played Mannarino yesterday. So overall, the level's gone sky high. When you look at his radar, then you start to see why. This is for those 17 matches. That serve quality score for those 17 matches is, if I just bring context through the leaderboards again, here you go, serve quality. It was 9.1 for anybody listening, his average. That would put him up there with a Pelka behind Petri Pericard. He's already, for his 52-week average, an 8.8. So one of the best servers on the tour. But it's gone from being brilliant to like just elite level
and
serving.
He is way more competent once a point gets started compared to Opelka and Petri Pericard.
Exactly. And he's also he's a excellent defender, despite the fact, like when he wants to be, like when he's had his off-sea periods and he makes bad shot selection because he's a flamboyant player that does some like seemingly like dumb stuff at times. When he's locking in, he has great court coverage, much better than those two that you've just talked about, brilliant hand skills, and is very good at passing, baiting people, bringing people in with that. So yeah, he's way more accomplished. His ground that I'll turn his averages on, and you'll see
baseline points won, 54%. He's winning rallies.
54%, and his own average for the whole 52 weeks is 49, so below tour average, which is obviously 50 for baseline points won. So yeah, way up, 54%. Conversion score, extremely clinical in this period in attack up. So it's not that Sinner perfectly well-rounded radar, because his forehand is still up and down even when he's winning matches.
But it's gotten a little better here, as that's something that I think has, at least to my eye test, it's improved. And I'm not getting a massive look. I'm not getting a massive reading on that through the numbers, but certainly a small reading on it.
Exactly. You do get forehand in score going up, average speed up 2 miles an hour. So he's making more forehands and hitting it harder. And
RPM?
Yeah.
Slightly up.
Slightly up. Slicing less, because he obviously does like chuck his forehand in with lots of drop shots, so hitting more conventional forehands. So he's a classic person that's near the top of all the variation metrics, so the opposite of Sinner. So variation, but actually shifting that back to being a bit more Sinner-like, if you will, a bit more court-based. Never been Sinner-like, but you know what I mean.
His core shot percentage has gone up.
Exactly, in this period. So he's playing less Bublik-y and more sort of standard, if you will.
Absolutely. He does need to face, I'll just add this, you don't need to respond to this. He's had some weak fields in some of the events that he's played. So, now the question is, what is it going to look like against some of these other guys? Tom, pleasure as always. We really appreciate you kind of opening the door into all of these insights to the audience here and for my own education. Always enjoy these chats a lot.
Cheers, Gill. Always fun to come on.
All right. A thank you, as always, to Tom Corrie. Always great to have him on. We'll probably do it one more time before we flip the calendar to 2026, and that will likely be after the season is over. Tennis Insights usually does kind of a year-end stat dump where, you look at the leaders over the course of the year. And I like to kind of go through that with Tom and actually dig deeper into some of the numbers that we may be surprised by. For example, let's say somebody comes up with a great forehand quality and it's surprising. Well, why? Is it their in percentage is really high? Is it their spin rate is really high? So you kind of get the point. I like to kind of go a little bit deeper. So that'll be our year-end superlatives. And I'll be back next week. Beijing and Tokyo finals are Tuesday and Wednesday. Actually flipped around. I was going to say respectively, but flipped around. Anyway, it's a couple of midweek finals. So I'll be doing content on that, but I also might try to set up some interviews. This is kind of the time of year where we can do some out-of-the-box content. So I'll see you then. Hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next time.